Look, we knew this was coming, and we know there may be more on the way. It's difficult to balance it out with what the Chancellor says about this giving us a soft landing eventually, compared to the immediate and very sharp pain that people are feeling.
I think, for what it's worth, that the discussion you had with your two commentators just before the top of the hour should be required viewing for all political parties, because you asked exactly, if I may say so, the right kind of question. The number one question is, so what can politicians actually do about this? It's fine talking about central banks raising interest rates. Of course, those people you talked to in Crawley were saying exactly what you'd expect them to say, and we didn't expect anything different. Well, just 1 second. The Monetary Policy Committee, which makes that decision, actually there were two on there, two of that committee of 9 people, saying that they wanted the interest rate rise to be higher, i.e. 0.5%, and only one saying they should actually hold. The others voted, as most people expected, for a 0.25% rise. What is the hidden message coming out of this? Well, it's not so hidden, is it? 2024 is going to be a flatline year for the economy. Maybe inflation will come down. Do people actually care what that headline inflation figure actually is? Pensioners do, because their pensions rise because of the rate of the retail price index, not the one we just saw, the CPI, the consumer price index, which we saw coming down very, very slightly. But my question remains, do people actually care about those figures, or do they care about the basic fact that the cost of living is rising? There is nothing in what the government, the Bank of England was saying yesterday that me and other commentators actually take by saying 2024 is going to be any better. It's not. Inflation, now it may be that the government gets to its promise of cutting the present inflation figure by half by the end of the year, which they promised to do. But that doesn't say a great deal for the public, for the public themselves, the voters themselves, the people who are finding a considerable strain on the wallet. So unfortunately, I'm really sorry, I have to say that things don't look very good for 2024. But nevertheless, I think that your discussion towards the top of the hour should be required viewing, because you covered all the points, if I may say so, completely. And the number one question, Stephen and Anne, is what would any politician do right now? Question is probably there isn't a great deal to do.
No. I mean, the messages we're getting at the moment from the Chancellor saying, yes, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for longer, but it's the only thing to do. We've got other messages from politicians saying the era of cheap food is over. Were you stressed? When you took on your mortgage, were you stress tested to this sort of rate? Is it our fault that we're feeling the pinch so badly at the moment?
No, it's real life. It's nobody's fault. It's just what's happening at the moment. Things are getting more and more expensive wherever you look. Yes, food is getting more expensive. Water is going to get more expensive. Energy is going to get more expensive. There's no getting away from that. It's just the way of the world. There's too many of us around, and a lack of resources and big problems throughout the world, which I don't need to dwell on right here. But the question is, what actually can be done? Is there anything other than the rather clumsy imposition of high interest rates that central banks around the world are having to do? The only message from this is that things are going to get slightly worse, and we are in what economists talk about, a very dry, horrible phrase, or a horrible world, called a restrictive economy, i.e. The days of cheap money are over. I would say, though, for now, but dare you look forward to 2026, 2027? Probably not. It's a long, long way ahead. And there's a lot of tough decisions to be made in the time until then.
What is going on in the United States and indeed across lots of mainland Europe that is meaning that their inflation is significantly lower than ours? Why are we lagging behind?
I think, for what it's worth, I think the Bank of England were relatively slow. I think they put up interest rates right at the last moment. The United States was quicker off the mark. However, interesting you should mention that, because today we get the jobless figures from the United States, and it's felt that the jobs market there is slowing very, very slightly indeed. Now, these are the most important figures for the financial markets throughout the world. Everything stops when these numbers come out around about lunchtime on a monthly basis, happens to be today. Now, that I think that the jobs market is slowing in the United States. Do they have the sort of flexibility to cope with this? Yes, I think they probably do. Why is that? Because one, they're a big economy, and secondly, the labour force is quite happy to move around to where the jobs are. It doesn't happen in this country. We're very much more, how can I put it, very much more static, I think, in terms of our job search than they are in the United States. But you're quite right. Every single bank, with a few notable exceptions, but those are sort of hermit economies like North Korea, are actually increasing, making things more restrictive. Don't take your eyes off the European Union and what the ECB is doing. Yes, the European Central Bank has been raising interest rates, but Germany and France are both facing big strains of their economy, as are Italy and Spain. And remember, those four countries are the giants as far as the European Union is concerned. So they're having their problems as well. Not saying they're as bad as Britain. Britain is an island, an offshore island, and a very, very small economy. But we still, punch well above our weight as far as the rest of the world's concerned. But we are following a general line that central banks around the world are doing, i.e. making borrowing more expensive in an effort to bring down inflation. The message from politicians, if I may just say, has to be, doesn't matter which side of the house you're actually on, that inflation is a hidden tax. No question about that. And it has to be beaten down. Those of us who remember what it was like before Thatcher came in 1979, before Margaret Thatcher came in 1979, know what high inflation is, and will probably remember this.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. Actually, it's interesting you're talking about jobs there, because one think tank, according to The Guardian, one prominent think tank is predicting that the price for taming inflation will be an extra 350,000 people on Britain's dole queues.
Yeah, possibly. Who knows? Or it may be. Actually, the interesting thing is what you should be doing is also, as well as taking a note of these headline figures, if I may say so, is it would be quite interesting to know what small businesses and entrepreneurs are thinking right now. I suspect that a lot of those companies, and I talk to them quite regularly for all sorts of different reasons, are slightly more optimistic than the big general figures at the moment. I mean, you get the Chancellor saying that, of course, now is not the time to veer around like a supermarket trolley, as he was saying yesterday, quite right too, would send out all the wrong kind of signals. But the fact is, there is still a beating heart among small businesses within this country. And I don't think enough is made of them. They find things very difficult. If I were a politician, I'd try to make life as easy as possible for the biggest employers in the country, who happen to be the vast bulk of small businesses.
Yeah, how would that work, though? I mean, obviously, there's pressures on things like the business rates, which have increased, and all the rest of it. I mean, you could reduce all of that. That would make a significant difference.
I think it would. I think.
Yeah, but how does that? But Mike, explain to me if that stimulates growth, right? But how does that then impact inflation?
Well, that's the terrible sum, isn't it? That's the terrible sort of machine that you have, the working, the moving parts there. I think the answer to your very good question about that, Stephen, is when is the question. I mean, if you want growth in the future, you have to be encouraging entrepreneurs, and you have to be making a stable environment from which they can flourish. I don't feel that happens at the moment in the UK, but it's a really difficult message to sell, and politicians will always go for an easy option because that's just what they do. But what one is right about these kind of things. You're right about this, Stephen, that you have to somehow engender growth, but at the same time not chuck away the orthodoxy in the way that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng did over that very short period, which is one of the reasons we're facing the kind of problems that we are at the moment.